Adolf Hitler. The name alone evokes a visceral reaction, conjuring images of unimaginable cruelty and destruction. His legacy is forever intertwined with the horrors of World War II, a conflict that engulfed the world in darkness and claimed millions of lives. Yet, even decades after his death, the question of Hitler's true nature continues to spark debate. Was he an evil anomaly, a singular force of hatred and destruction, or were there deeper currents at play, societal and political forces that enabled his rise and fueled his horrific ambitions? To understand Hitler, we must delve into the historical context that shaped his worldview and propelled him to power. We must examine the events that led to the outbreak of World War II, from the annexation of Austria to the invasion of Poland. And we must confront the horrifying reality of the Holocaust, the systematic genocide that remains a chilling testament to the depths of human depravity. This is not an attempt to sanitize history or to minimize the gravity of Hitler's crimes. Rather, it is an exploration of one of history's most pivotal figures, a man whose actions continue to shape our world today. By understanding Hitler, we gain a deeper understanding of the fragility of peace, the seductive nature of hatred, and the importance of vigilance in safeguarding our values. The seeds of World War II were sown in the aftermath of World War I. Germany, defeated and humiliated, faced crippling economic depression and political instability. It was in this fertile ground of resentment and despair that Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party took root. Hitler, a charismatic orator, skillfully exploited the anxieties of the German people, channeling their frustrations towards scapegoats, Jews, communists, and other minorities. The Nazi Party's message of national revival and racial purity resonated with a population desperate for a return to greatness. Hitler promised to restore Germany to its rightful place on the world stage, to avenge the injustices of the Versailles Treaty, and to create a 1,000-year Reich. Step by step, through a combination of propaganda, intimidation, and political maneuvering, Hitler tightened his grip on power. By 1933, he had become Chancellor of Germany, effectively transforming the country into a totalitarian dictatorship. With each passing year, Hitler grew bolder, emboldened by a lack of meaningful opposition from within Germany or from the international community. He rebuilt the German military in defiance of the Treaty of Versailles. He annexed Austria in 1938, proclaiming the unification of all German-speaking peoples, and he set his sights on Czechoslovakia, demanding the annexation of the Sudetenland, a region with a significant German population. Despite warnings from countries like Great Britain and France, Hitler remained undeterred. He believed that the West, still weary from the horrors of World War I, lacked the stomach for another conflict. He was about to make a grave miscalculation. The world watched with bated breath as tensions escalated in Europe. Hitler's ambitions were now clear, his hunger for conquest insatiable. On September 1st, 1939, the world's worst fears were realized. Nazi Germany, in a blatant act of aggression, invaded Poland. The Polish army, though valiant, was no match for the might of the German Wehrmacht. Using blitzkrieg tactics, a lightning war of rapid movement and overwhelming force, German tanks and aircraft quickly overwhelmed Polish defenses. Within weeks, Poland was effectively crushed, its territory divided between Germany and the Soviet Union, which had signed a non-aggression pact with Hitler just weeks before the invasion. The invasion of Poland marked a turning point in history. Great Britain and France, bound by treaty obligations to defend Poland's sovereignty, declared war on Germany on September 3, 1939. World War II, the deadliest conflict in human history, had begun. The world watched in horror as Hitler's forces swept across Europe, conquering Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Belgium, and France in rapid succession. The Nazi war machine, fueled by a toxic ideology of racial superiority and territorial expansion, seemed unstoppable. As the war raged on, Hitler's true intentions became horrifyingly clear. The Nazi regime, driven by its twisted ideology, embarked on a campaign of systematic extermination targeting Jews, Roma, homosexuals, political opponents, and anyone deemed undesirable by the Nazi state. The Holocaust, as this genocide came to be known, stands as one of the darkest chapters in human history. Jews, deemed the primary enemy of the Nazi state, were subjected to unimaginable horrors. They were rounded up, stripped of their possessions, and herded into ghettos. From there they were transported in cattle cars to concentration camps, where they were subjected to forced labor, starvation, torture, and mass murder. The Nazis established a vast network of death camps, purpose-built for mass extermination. At Auschwitz, Birkenau, Treblinka, Sobibor, and other camps, Jews were gassed upon arrival or worked to death. Children, the elderly, and the infirm were often murdered immediately. The sheer scale and brutality of the Holocaust defied comprehension. 6 million Jews, along with millions of others, perished at the hands of the Nazi regime. The Holocaust was not a side effect of the war, it was a deliberate act of genocide, meticulously planned and executed by the Nazi state. It stands as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked hatred, the fragility of human civilization, and the importance of confronting evil in all its forms. Section 5, A Steadfast Resolve, Churchill's Opposition to Nazi Tyranny. While Hitler's shadow spread across Europe, a steadfast resistance emerged. In Great Britain, Winston Churchill, a man who had long warned of the Nazi threat, rallied his nation to stand firm against the Nazi tide. Churchill, appointed Prime Minister in May 1940, refused to appease Hitler or to negotiate with a regime that he recognized as inherently evil. "We shall fight on the beaches," Churchill famously declared. "We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." Churchill's words galvanized the British people, inspiring them to resist the Nazi onslaught. Despite facing overwhelming odds, Britain stood alone against the Nazi war machine, its determination unbroken. Churchill's unwavering opposition to Hitler was not simply a matter of political expediency. It was rooted in a deep moral conviction that the Nazi regime represented an existential threat to civilization itself. He recognized the inherent evil of Hitler's ideology and understood that appeasement would only embolden the Nazi dictator. Churchill's leadership proved instrumental in rallying the Allied forces and ultimately defeating Nazi Germany. His courage, his eloquence, and his unwavering belief in the justness of the Allied cause made him one of the most iconic figures of the 20th century. Section 6. Shifting Sands of Opinion, Contemporary Views on Hitler. Decades after the fall of the Third Reich, Hitler's legacy continues to cast a long shadow over the world. While there is near universal condemnation of his actions and ideology, contemporary views on Hitler are not without nuance. Public opinion polls reveal a complex and evolving understanding of the man and his crimes. The vast majority of people today view Hitler as the epitome of evil, a symbol of hatred, genocide, and tyranny. The horrors of the Holocaust, meticulously documented and preserved, serve as a stark reminder of the depths of human depravity to which Hitler's ideology led. For many, the very mention of his name evokes feelings of revulsion and disgust. However, a small minority hold more nuanced and often controversial views. Some argue that Hitler's early economic policies, which lifted Germany out of the Great Depression, should be considered separately from his wartime atrocities. Others contend that while his actions were reprehensible, he was a product of his time, a leader who exploited the prevailing social and political currents of his era. It is crucial to approach these divergent viewpoints with caution and critical thinking. While it is tempting to try and find explanations for Hitler's actions, to understand the historical context that allowed him to rise to power, it is essential to avoid any attempt to rationalize or minimize the horrors he inflicted upon the world. Section 7. Echoes of the Past, Hitler's Legacy in Modern Politics. The spectre of Hitler and the Nazi era continues to haunt modern politics, serving as a cautionary tale against the dangers of unchecked nationalism, xenophobia, and authoritarianism. In recent years, there has been a disturbing rise in right-wing populist movements around the world, many of which espouse rhetoric and policies eerily reminiscent of the Nazi era. From the United States to Europe and beyond, politicians and political parties have invoked Hitler's name, either to draw comparisons to their opponents or to justify their own policies. The use of such rhetoric is deeply troubling, as it trivializes the horrors of the Nazi era and normalizes extremist ideologies. It is imperative that we remain vigilant in the face of such rhetoric and actively challenge attempts to rehabilitate Hitler or minimize the significance of his crimes. The lessons of the past must serve as a stark warning against the dangers of complacency and the importance of safeguarding democratic values. Section 8, Debunking Revisionism, Confronting Distorted History. In recent years, there has been a concerted effort by some groups to revise the history of World War II, often with the aim of minimizing Hitler's crimes or shifting blame to other historical figures. These revisionist narratives, often disseminated through online platforms and social media, distort historical facts, manipulate evidence, and exploit the complexities of history to advance their agendas. Some revisionists attempt to portray Hitler as a misunderstood figure, a strong leader who was simply trying to restore Germany to its former glory. They downplay the horrors of the Holocaust, claiming that the number of victims has been exaggerated or that Hitler himself was unaware of the extent of the atrocities. Others seek to shift blame for the war to other historical figures such as Winston Churchill or Franklin D. Roosevelt. They argue that these leaders deliberately provoked Hitler or that their actions prolonged the conflict unnecessarily. It is crucial to approach these revisionist narratives with a critical eye. Historians and researchers have spent decades meticulously documenting the events of World War II, amassing a vast body of evidence that unequivocally condemns Hitler and his regime. Attempts to rewrite history, to whitewash the crimes of the Nazis, are not only intellectually dishonest, but also deeply offensive to the memory of the millions who suffered and perished under Nazi rule. Section 9. An enduring condemnation, the weight of evidence. The question of whether Hitler was really that bad is not a matter of debate, it is a matter of historical record. The evidence against him is overwhelming, irrefutable, and eternally damning. His name is synonymous with some of the most heinous crimes in human history: genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity. The world bears the scars of his actions to this day. The Holocaust, a systematic attempt to exterminate an entire people, serves as a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity to which hatred and intolerance can lead. The millions who perished in the war on battlefields and in concentration camps stand as a testament to the devastating consequences of unchecked aggression and unchecked power. Hitler's legacy is not one of complexity or nuance. It is a legacy of evil, pure and simple. To attempt to rehabilitate him, to minimize his crimes, or to normalize his ideology is to betray the memory of his victims and to pave the way for future atrocities. We must never forget the lessons of the past, lest we be condemned to repeat them.